This is a special edition of the webinars presented by the Data Center. And the whole point is that we're going to be showing off how, oh, not showing off, but showing how some of the new features can help you with your data analysis and collection. We're also going to show how we've made some of the older functions that have continued more intuitive and easier to use. So Seth's actually going to walk you through it step by step. Just a couple of housekeeping things. You all are muted, and now I am not, so you can actually hear me and hear Seth. If you have any questions, please use the chat function. A lot of you guys are already using the question and chat perfectly fine, so thank you for that, and thank you for your patience. If you have questions on other things outside of the Data Center, please send those to the website at the Contact Us feature, or you can email me at kmencarini@tooldesign.com. If you're having technical difficulties, continue to use the chat, or you can call me or email me. Sorry, email me is the best way to reach me. At the end, our webinar will be recorded and uploaded to the webinar website. So I will give you a brief introduction into Seth, and then we'll get started. All right, so the purpose of today's webinar is to introduce you to the new data system. Today you'll hear from Seth LaJeunesse, the data expert for the National Center for Safe Routes to School. If you've worked with the Safe Routes to School data at any point in your Safe Routes to School journey, you've likely talked to him. He keeps the data center functional and useful, and he's the key person for all of our nationwide data analysis. So with that, Seth, I'm going to launch onto you. So I'm going to give you the controls in just a second. All right, go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, Katie. And welcome again to everybody. I appreciate you bearing with us as we address some of our technical difficulties. I would imagine that many of you have actually talked to Katie in person, so welcome to you. I've been doing this for about 5 years now, working with the data system at the National Center. And so I know I've spoken with many of you, so thank you for joining us. And for those who might be new, welcome. To begin, we're just going to go over kind of an overview of the new data system, some of the features that have remained the same from the older version, and then some of the newer features that Katie kind of portended in her introduction. To begin, we see on saferoutesdata.org, this is the page that you would come to when you visit that site. We have a couple of documents here that orient you to what is in and what's new about the data system, in particular the new features document, which I have open here. Just very briefly look at this. I'm going to touch upon all of these in the presentation. This is just a brief overview of what has really changed about this enhanced system. Viewing information already in the system, so we've created this new user called an info seeker, and essentially anybody who has a login for the data system can see information, a certain level of information for any school within our data system. Can add pending tallies and surveys to schools, and I'll explain that in a minute. Grouping schools, whereas before we called it a program, and then there were schools within that program. We now have school groups. We understood that program was confusing for some folks, so we have altered that to make it more intuitive. If you scroll down a little bit, tagging. This is something I'll talk about too in greater detail. Essentially, you can tag schools within a group. If you had a large school district, for example, and you wanted to subgroup those schools, you could tag them based upon something like geography. So you could tag maybe a group as Eastern schools, another group as Western schools, for example. The data collection time periods, this one I'm extremely excited about, and I know some people have used it to good effect already. This is when you tag something to give a description to a data set. We'll talk a little more about this as well. But in essence, it gives you a sense at what time something happened at a particular school or group of schools, like a sidewalk project. And we'll talk about the implications of that too. And one of the more fundamental changes too is that we've linked up what is in the National Center's database, all the school travel information, with all schools within the U.S. Department of Education's database. The U.S. Department of Education collects additional information about schools' enrollment, the racial and ethnic distribution, things of that nature. So we're excited that those are now linked up. I'm going to go back to the data page here. Another document I want to orient your attention to is the Navigating the Data System. This is a very important document, and it functions essentially as kind of an objectives-based FAQ. So what you're trying to do, most of what you're trying to do is going to be within this document. So for instance, we get a lot of questions about this question here. I would like to see how many parents completed the parent survey during a certain time period. Well, one of the things we could do is scroll down to the answer to that response. So right here, I would like to see how many parents completed the parent survey during a certain time period. There's two steps to do that, and it just very clearly outlines how to do that. You can save this on your computer, you can print it out. We hope that it's of use to you. And then probably the number one question we get is how we mail data to the National Center. And so this document here describes the very steps to doing that, how to mail data to the National Center. Okay, so with that, just going to take on a brief journey. So buckle up, we're going on a little ride. I'm going to log in as myself. I've created a program in some schools for purposes of this webinar. As you can see, the new kind of the home page that you're going. So if you wanted to hit this again, you could see the home page. It lists the schools that you have access to, the work in progress. So some of those, most of those relate to pending tallies and surveys, but also ones where there are data sets that have no surveys or tallies yet. For instance, if you are sending your data to the National Center to process, they would have no until we can upload those data for you. And then it also has an alerts section. Alerts could also relate to tally or schools that have not collected tally or survey information in 15 months or more. Just giving you a sense that if you're looking to do evaluation at that school, maybe it's time to revisit and do some more data collection. So I'm going to start here at Manage Users and then kind of jump back over to schools and then work from left to right. I'll start with the Manage Users because this relates to if you're working with a regional program or even a local program, you assembling the team of partners that might be doing some data collection and data management with you. So we can look at Manage Users through this menu. We could also see those who are waiting approval, and it looks like I have somebody that's waiting for approval to do something called Run Reports, and we'll talk about that. So when I click View, you'll see here that my colleague Doug Nicholas is looking to do Run Reports at Cycle Track Elementary, something of a whimsical name for an elementary school. Right now I could update that by updating school permissions. That would essentially give him Run Reports level, which again I'll describe in just a minute. If we want to look at everybody who has approved and pending, we can see here. And if we want to refine the view just to see pending again, we can do that. If we want to see those who just have a certain level of access, we could do Run Reports. In Edit Data, we can look at all of them again. So, what these relate to, let's go back to the home page here. Run Reports is a step beyond what we are calling now the info seeker. So like I said in the beginning, when you create a user account, everybody becomes an info seeker. And they can see whether or not a school has collected information. And I'll show you that in just a second. Run reports is next. Those people can, what it sounds like, run the reports that we'll talk about in a minute. They cannot edit or add information. And then you have edit data, which is one step beyond run reports. They can run reports but also add, subtract information. And then we have administrative privileges, administrator privileges, which is essentially if you want a co-captain, you're the administrator, the keeper of the data, and you want someone else to be with you. Or it looks like you're the administrator now and you're about to step away from your position. Maybe you want to transfer that to somebody else. You can add a user here and first search our database of users. That's what it's doing. So I'm going to look for my friend. His name is Jeff Brubaker. He happens to be a transportation planner in the town that I live in. And when you do that, you find that he is, in fact, in the data system as a user for it. So I can select him, and I see that he is an administrator at these schools and then this school group. I'm going to go back here. So one of the things I want to talk about is the searching for schools and adding schools. So that's what we're going to come back to schools here, and I can look at my schools. You have Cycle Track Elementary, Safety Clinic Middle, and Shared Path Elementary. It's all very safe routes focused kind of schools. My school groups, UNC, HSRC, where I work. If you search schools, you're searching for schools within the National Center's data system. So if I wanted to, we had just seen Jeff Brubaker's here. If I wanted to, I can look at Carborough Elementary, which is just down the street from where I live. I see that there is a school named Carborough Elementary School collecting information. They have both tallies and surveys here. I can click on one of these and see the tallies that they've collected over time. Now, because I have only info seeker status, I haven't requested permission to see anything beyond this or do anything beyond this. I see essentially the tallies that they've collected. And I can see the surveys that they have collected. If I wanted to, I can click on the school and see the information. I can see who the contact person is, and I could also request access right here. So for this school, at the school level, there's two levels of access you can ask for and request. Run reports, which would mean I would just be able to download reports. I'm not able to edit any information, or edit data. So for these purposes, I'm going to request permission to run reports. And you'll get a message that basically says the contact person for this school has received your request, and they can respond, and they could actually go into manage users, just like here with my friend Doug here. I can update this to grant or deny. I could always say if he's really we're not getting along that day or something, I could always say no access as just an example. Okay, so that was search schools. When you add a new school, say you want to add a school, you're just starting up your program, this actually searches all schools within the U.S. Department of Education's database. So one of the schools I was interested in earlier was Phillips Elementary School, and that's actually in Pennsylvania. It's a school that my wife taught at when we were living in Pittsburgh. So here I see two, the one in Pittsburgh, and I want to make sure that this is the right school. We can select that school's name, click on it, and it gives you essentially the address of the school and the school district that it belongs to. So I verify that, yes, that is the school. And if the school are in the system, there would be a column right here that says already in system. But right now I see that it's not. So to add it, I simply click and then add check schools. I'm not going to add this one today, but you see how that works.
Hey, Seth.
Yes?
We got an on-topic question that I don't want to forget.
By all means.
So you searched for the school, and you saw that it wasn't in the system already, so you add it, and now it's going to be associated with your account.
That's right.
Now, if you had found that the school was in the list, would you be able to add data to that school, or would you need to request permission to make new data contributions in the system?
That is a wonderful question, and that actually gets to something, the pending tallies and surveys. You can, if you've requested, so the first step is to request access. As soon as you've done that, I've requested access to Carver Elementary. As soon as you've done that, you can start entering in, see right here it says when I go to my schools, Carver Elementary, that my access level is pending. I can start entering in tallies and surveys for that school. They will remain pending until the administrator of that school says, okay, yes, I'll accept those data, and I'll give you access to the school.
And then when it's pending, do you run reports, or?
No, you cannot run reports on pending data. It has to be approved by the keeper of the data, the administrator.
I see.
Yep, that is a great question, though. Yeah. Are there others at this time, or should we move on? Okay.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I think that was a great answer. Thanks, Seth.
All right, wonderful. So you saw before I clicked on the school's name when I looked for it. I could also request permission here. And this same function, it'll search for schools within the National Center's database, and you can request through this way as well, directly from the menu at the top. If we move over from left to right, we can look at My Tallies. So under My Tallies, I see a list here, all these tallies that essentially I don't really have access to. See the tally detail, the view and edit is what only ones I have access to are the bottom three here. And you can kind of just assess, you can sort these by school name, by school group, by city, date collected. So if you want the most recent at the top, you can do that. Number of tallies, etc. If I wanted to look at some detail here on the tallies, I can click View and Edit. And here you have, this is a record of each individual tally in the set. If you wanted to view what it looked like, you can look at it like this. Go back, and you can edit it. If, say, you've made a mistake, you realize that you misentered the tally, you can go back and you can edit. And this allows you to change anything within the form. And you might notice that this form looks a lot like, I'm sorry, it's right over here, this, the actual instrument itself. So this is the tally sheet here. Online it looks very, very similar to that, and it's just direct input. A new feature we've also added is you can save if you're not quite finished yet and you don't really have time to finish a tally. You can save it as a work in progress. We'll go back to My Tallies. Another thing you can look at in the table, if you click on, so anything that's highlighted like this, you can click on and get information. So here I see at CycleTrack Elementary, these data were collected in September 2011, and you see that at the time, more than 50% of the school children were to be impacted by the Safe Routes activities. About 500, you can see the school enrollment there. So you get a sense of the level of impact. And then exporting data as well. This will open up a comma-separated value file. It looks very much like an Excel file, and it has all of the raw data so if you wanted to do your own analysis, if you wanted to compile data over time, you can use this feature as well. If you wanted to enter a new tally, you go here. Now this could be used to enter another tally into an existing set. We'll look at CycleTrack again, and we could add to existing time period here, or set as we tend to call it. You could add a time period. So we can say, let's add this year. And you can just enter in all the information you want. You could also tag this. So if you decide, if you had a major unveiling of a pedestrian bicycle safety curriculum, you could create a tag here at this time, and it'll always be attached to this data set. So you have knowledge of when something happened and what it was. And it's also useful for institutional knowledge. So if you were to hand the keys, as Katie said earlier, to somebody else, then they would also have an idea of what had happened in the past at the school. We had done a study a couple of years ago where we were looking, cancel out of this, when we were looking at several schools and wanted to know what happened 3 years before we were talking to them. And a lot of times it was a little difficult. You had to look at records and, really kind of reliant upon your predecessor's record keeping and things like that. This way, tagging can be a way of saving that type of information right in with your data. So that said, we can, and from both of these, as you'll see, we have tallies and we have surveys, and at the bottom of both of them, you have an option to mail data to the National Center. We'll quickly visit this page. This is of perennial interest. Most of the time, you're going to mail data to the center which do not have data associated with them yet. So this one here, I believe that one's already been mailed to us. And then down here, I had Shared Path Elementary. Looks like they are going to be sending us their parent surveys here. So it's a matter of identifying under the travel tally table or the parent survey table which school and time period you're interested in, and then clicking Print Selected Records to Mail. And this prints and produces essentially the cover sheet that many of you, I'm sure, are aware of. And the cover sheet has some instructions on how to set up your data for sending it to us here at the National Center. So I will click off of this. So that's how you do that. And you can get to this same page through both of these means here. Now, if I wanted to run a report, we got a notification, or you were done filling in the tallies yourself, you can start running reports. What we can do is there's 3 types of reports under the tallies, and there is one school at one time period. There are multiple schools at essentially a season, and then there is a report that compares one school at 2 different time periods. And this is really for data analysis purposes. If you have data that's been tagged, particularly the time period tagged, you can compare one time period, say, that without the tags. So say one time period did not have infrastructure built yet, and then you can look at another one that was after the infrastructure was built, and you can see if there's any significant change. So for these purposes, I'm going to create a report comparing one time period versus another at the only school I have two time periods of data for. So you'll see here time 1 collected. You want to select the earlier time. If you select the later time, you won't be able to select time 2 here. You want to select the early time first, and second, and then hit Run Report. And what this does, we'll just go back here. This generates a report that will compare. There's some language here about some considerations when you're interpreting the results. And here, before we even look at the interpretation here, you see that from September, and then from September 2011 to September 2012, we have major shifts in travel patterns at this school. And just so you know, this is also real data. The identifiers have been changed. So this school really had some remarkable increases here. You see some results here. There's a statistically significant increase in the percentage of students who ride by walking, and then it's classified as family vehicle as well. So a lot of this came from family vehicle. So it looks like what happened is a lot of children who used to be driven are now, some of them are riding the bus, but a large proportion of them are now walking and biking to school. If you look, and then again you scroll down and you find very similar patterns in the afternoon. And the results from the tests kind of validate this as well. Looks like fewer children being picked up after school in the car, more riding the bus, and particularly more walking and biking to school. So that's an example there of a report. If we go to the reports again, you could also look at the combined or the aggregate reports. So we can look at a report here at the school level here. You could also use these tags to differentiate those where certain interventions happened and others, but for this purposes we'll just select the time period, the season collected, and right here you'll see a note about the spring being, essentially it's a semester division, so from January to June is spring and then fall is July to December. And we click Run Report here. And one of the updated features we have incorporated is a lot of times this was a black box. When you clicked Run Report there, you weren't entirely sure which schools were included in the report until the report was generated. So this is a step we've incorporated so that you can see that 3 schools are going to be included in this report. Then you click Run Report. And that takes a little bit of time. There's some number crunching that has to go on. So here, I definitely recommend, if you have collected quite a bit of data at quite a few schools, to take a look at the various types of reports. And when you're looking particularly at the one school, 2 time period reports, when you're comparing one time period to another at one school, to kind of consider, if you have a lot of data at the school, consider choosing 2 very similar times of year if weather patterns vary a lot in your area. Because a lot of times you'll see maybe a significant decrease, but it's because at time 2 you collected it in February, and time 1 you collected it in June, so it's just reflecting weather-related differences. So for this purpose here, I think I'm going to get out of this, and I'm not entirely sure where that went. Let's see. Here we are. Here is an aggregate report. It gives you a summary of the schools, the time periods, the number of questionnaires returned, the number distributed, so you get a response rate. Male, female, you get some information on that. The various grade levels that are represented. So each of these comes with graphs, and graphs are accompanied by associated table, so you get a sense of that. You can see at this school quite a few kids are walking. So it compares morning to afternoon at all 3 of these schools, rather. And then you see a breakdown by distance from school. So you can see that most kids who live within a quarter of a mile are walking, and then the farther away you get to school, the more you have being driven and taking the bus, and so on. So this is an example of an aggregated report. Katie, would we have any questions that have come in about what we're seeing right now?
Yeah,
what we're talking about?
I actually don't have any on reports, but I have on some other topics. So whenever you're ready, you let me know.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, we're kind of going through what is contained within the system, but if anyone has any pointed questions about how to do anything in particular, I'm certainly welcome to responding to those.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about some functionality questions first.
Sure.
So I'm getting a lot of questions about deleting. Like, what if I put in a school group and I need to edit it or delete it, or I put in a time period and it wasn't really what I meant, can I delete it, or what's the best way to deal with that?
That's a great question. So if you wanted to add a new school, and again, I'm going to make up just some school here. If you add a new school, so we essentially ask you to try to find if the school is listed within the kind of master list. And then if you can't, we would certainly want to encourage you to enter it in yourself. There's a case where we have a new school in this area and it's not in the list yet because they're usually about a year behind. They collect it at the end of the year, the Department of Education, that is. But if you got all of this information here, so I'm going to put in where I live here and just some other stuff as an example. And then you can add it to a school group. Sorry, I'm going to have to put this into, let's see. I'll pick on my friend Jeff here, who has jurisdiction over this. So then there's a funding. So basically, there's a process in order to add a school, and I'm just kind of going through it right now.
Okay.
So if you wanted to, if you entered something incorrectly,
yeah,
you can edit that here and then save the changes.
But you can't like delete a school or delete a school group, right?
Oh, I see. So you're saying delete it? No, unfortunately, you can't just delete it. If you have an issue with that, please send an email and we can take care of that.
I think that makes sense. That way we don't accidentally delete something that we didn't mean to.
That's exactly right. We didn't want that to happen where people said, whoops, I spent all this time and then I've just deleted it. And so
right.
More of a thoughtful process. Yep.
So I have another one for you. We talked a little bit about, I have some questions about the user situation. So we can add users. Is there any limit to the number of users you can add?
No, there's no limit, not that I'm aware of. Unless Pam knows differently, who's on the line and helped also develop this.
Right?
Yeah,
that's great.
I think, yeah, you can add as many users as you want. I would just be mindful of the level of access you give. You don't want too many administrators or too many cooks in the kitchen, right? So maybe assigning different roles to people is definitely a good thing. So if you want them just access to the reports, definitely run reports level is sufficient.
Right.
But if you want them entering, yeah.
And actually, you led into another question that we've seen. So if for some reason your administrator is going to change hands,
yes,
it sounds like you can add another administrator, so you can do that as someone leaves.
That's right.
And then I think, is that right? Okay. And if for some reason the baton doesn't get passed before the person moves on, they can always contact the data center and ask for that to be moved. Is that correct?
That is totally right. Yeah, and we have that. That's happened quite a bit. So before,
environment, there's turnover.
That's right, and we totally understand that, and so it definitely helps us quite a bit, so that we have the most updated records. And you know, if you're passing the baton, do let us know.
All right, and so I have another one for you.
Sure.
We talked a little bit about granting and receiving permission. I have questions about how does the person being requested of the permission get notified, and how does that other person, the person who's the requestee, how do they know that they've been given permission? What's the mechanism for that?
If you've been given permission from a requestee, that is, right, you will be automatically given an email if that person has updated your permissions. So, for instance, if I went here and I manage my users, and I'm just interested in pending, so I look at Doug Nicholas here. He's checked. You could also uncheck him. If I update, once I do that, school permissions in my records have been updated, but also Doug has just received an email saying that I've granted him run report level access for Cycle Track Elementary.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So that's how that works.
Yeah, isn't that cool? So then we have a couple of other functional questions. One asks, they're excited about this tag system. Are they able to apply that to data they've entered previously in the old version of the data center?
So if we go here to our tallies here, and you click on, say, it looks like that's Carb Elementary. I don't have jurisdiction over that one yet. Here's one from September 2011, well before we've had tags.
Okay.
Tags are down here. I edit that. So if you see that there, here, let's go back just to go over that again.
Yeah,
so
please.
September 2011, Cycle Track Elementary. There's no tags associated now because that was in there before.
Right.
If you click on the time period, if you click on the school, it'll give you the school information. That's not what you're interested in this case. If you want it attached to the time, the date collected, you click on that, and you're presented with information about when these data were collected. You edit, and you'll see here there's some tags that I've created, but if you want to, you could create a tag. Is there any ideas for what we should create a tag on?
Great. How about before walk to school day?
Okay. Okay, now save the tag. And there it is.
Oh, that's so cool.
Because I've created this is now, I'm going to finish this. Okay, I'll look at it again, and now the tag is there, before walk to school day. So now, yeah, you have a sense that this happened before walk to school day. And so you could, right, if you wanted to do those reports, the one school at Cycle Track Elementary, and then do maybe another tally, say, in November, you could do a before and after walk to school day analysis.
Oh, cool.
So
actually, segueing into the next great question.
Yeah.
This relates to the report. So
sure.
who's asking if you can run a report that compares multiple schools over 2 time periods. And the example that they give, it says, if we have a school district, that we have all the schools in the district collected at the beginning of the school year and the end of the school year, can we compare all the data in one snapshot?
In one snapshot. We do not have anything, a report that is automated that collects or that compares multiple schools to multiple schools. If you're interested in that, I definitely encourage you to contact me directly. We can work on a design that would work for you.
That's cool.
The reason is because the numbers generated using the system, they can get so complex that it just kind of bogs it down. So we've really had to kind of streamline things, you know.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that's it's helpful to know that we can contact the data center as a resource.
Indeed.
Okay, so those are all the functional questions that I have, but I have a couple of more broad picture questions. Are you ready?
Yes, by all means.
Okay. So one is they said, can we send our survey data even if we don't have Safe Routes to School funding associated with it? And do you process data for high schools or other non-elementary middle schools?
Both great questions. The answer to the first one is we have a certain proportion of schools that do not receive Safe Routes funding in our database, and that's entirely okay. Some of them have gotten funding from many other sources, and that's something that you'll want to include at the school level here. Oh, I'm sorry, you want to go back here. The funding. I can't actually access that funding because that is not my school. But here's one. Here's where the funding form is. If you've gotten other federal funds, local government funds, you want to include that. It's just even for institutional knowledge. And remind me of the second question again, Katie?
Sure. So since it doesn't matter what kind of funding source, is there any limit to what kind of school you'll process data for? Like, for instance, will you process data for high schools?
We do. We have data from high schools. That's entirely okay. The Safe Routes program is designed to target K through 8, but there are many cases where high schoolers are helping out middle schoolers and elementary school children. So
and even if they want to collect data on their own high school, they can submit it. That's okay, right?
Even exactly, that's totally fine. Yep.
Great. I've got another question. This one just came in. This person says, as a county transportation planner, they will be the person most likely to submit safe routes to school grants, which, as a lot of programs have, there's a data collection requirement. So can this person become an administrator county-wide instead of just for this one school district? And if so, how do they go about that?
That is a great question. One of the things I recommend to the county administrator here is to visit My School Groups, and under here I have one school group, but if you wanted to add a school group at a county level, you're entirely licensed to do that. If you go here, you can have your group name be the county in which you're working in, and you can include as many schools within that county or as few schools as you want to and build upon it. So kind of considering that. Now if you wanted to, you could tag schools, not data sets, but schools within that school group with a district name to differentiate those in one district versus another within your broader county. But yes, you can have a group definitely be a county. Not a problem.
All right. I got a tricky one for you. Mm-hmm. There are rumors that the data system may not be around forever. Does the data center know how long they will continue to process data?
Well, that is a great question, and that relates to essentially the time of year.
Right.
So we generally, during, I guess you can call it peak periods and off-peak periods. Right now we're in an off-peak period, unless everybody online listening right now decides to submit data to us. So that generally takes 4 to 5 weeks when we're in our off period. As we get closer to November and into December, we're looking at about 6 to 8 week turnaround. And the same thing can be said about the end of May into June and July. That's typically another peak period. So it's basically at the end of the school semesters is when we see a lot of our data, and it's about a 6 to 8 week turnaround at that point.
And Seth, do you know if there's any end date to which we would not accept data anymore, like when the data system would no longer process data?
Again, another great question. Right now, our contract, we have funding through the end of this month, but we are really hopeful, and we've gotten some good signs that we'll continue to be the clearinghouse. We don't know for sure, but it looks like for the foreseeable future, for the next several years, we'll be able to continue providing these services.
And from what I understand, I think if something were to change, everyone would be notified, and there would be explanation for how you can continue to get your data and what to do. So please, no panic. If you haven't heard anything, that's good news. It just means that we're still waiting to hear as well, but we are optimistic.
That's right. Good point, Katie.
Well, I feel like I have answered all of the questions. Unless, if you guys want to keep using the question function or the chat box, let me know. We still have about 8 or so minutes left, so we'll make the most of Seth's time, but if you don't need anything, oh, we got a new one. Good one. All right. And Seth, I'm just going to read it. I apologize. I tried to screen this first, but this one says,
it's okay.
Can schools be in more than one group, or should we just use tagging for that? So, for example, we have the Georgia statewide group. Can those schools be separated out into other groups in addition to GA, or should we just use the tagging?
Oh, man, what a wonderful question. And yes, I would definitely advocate for your own purposes and for our purposes. I would definitely recommend tagging the schools. So if you need to subgroup them within a group, by all means, and you can give the same tag to multiple schools across groups. So if you want to group them in that way, you could do that. But yes, I would definitely advocate for avoiding putting schools in different groups.
So then, what is the purpose of having multiple groups under one account?
Well, some people work at a more regional level. So say you work in an MPO. And you might have many districts that span states within your MPO. So you might have a group in one state and a couple groups in another, It's just a way to kind of organize your data so that you're not confusing, you know, reporting for reporting purposes and things like that.
And Seth, Pam just added too that the big thing is that you can't put one school in more than one group. So that's what makes tagging so helpful. So you can either put all of your schools into one group, or if it's helpful for you to put them in multiple groups. But I agree. I think the tags are more flexible.
That's right. Yeah, and that county level example is a great one because you can really scale up to the county and say, you know, you're really only focusing on one portion of the county. You don't know, you might be doing that now, but you might expand later on. So it's good to have a one county level group and then tag schools according to some identifier within that group if you want to subgroup them within it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got another question right in here. So this relates to the usership again.
Yeah.
So how do you transfer an administrator? And Seth, I saw this question and I thought maybe it makes more sense just to add another administrator and then the other person just disappears. But would you ever advocate replacing someone, like actually removing someone as an administrator when adding another one?
You certainly could. If you're an administrator yourself and you have a co-administrator, and say your co-administrator leaves, and you can go in and edit that person's contact information and just create a totally different user. You could do that, or you can just add another one and then let us know, or you know, let that one kind of languish. It's totally up to you how you want to approach that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm looking to see if we have any more.
To pose a question to us.
Yeah. Hey, Seth.
Yes.
I think, I got another question. So someone says that they're an administrator and they only want to transfer administrator rights to one school, not the whole batch. Is there any way to do that?
Administrator rights, basically at a school level, we have two levels of access. Because no one's really an administrator of a school, they're an administrator of groups. So you can add someone just to a school and give them edit data access. That's kind of the highest level of access at a school level. If you just wanted them to see that one particular school, not any others within the school group, you can do that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's actually
question.
here. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So is there any way to access the raw data rather than a summary report?
Yes, indeed. So if you go to under My Tallies and My Survey, so this is where your data really lie, right? And you have the table here. We talked about it briefly before, but you can, so this is Tallies. You can access the raw data by this export data function. And what this is it produces a CSV, comma separated value file, that looks very much like an Excel file. You can save it as an Excel file after you open it up, which gives you essentially the raw data of the tally itself.
Oh, great.
So for those of you who are a little more data savvy or interested in this type of thing, this is a good approach. You could download these and put it on in Excel and have your way with them if you wanted to. We've definitely had some cases where people make good use of this. So.
So I think the user thing is going to be very popular. I'm getting another question.
Yeah.
So let's say you request permission and the person, one person is in charge of the data and they're no longer there. And it's probably sending out some email and you've been waiting, you're worried that it's going out to nowhere. What can we do to help them?
You know what? Get in contact with us. What we'll do, Pam and I are actually developing a protocol for that right now, is if that administrator hasn't logged in a certain time frame, and we're going to have to identify that, if they haven't logged in a little while, we feel comfortable granting access to the individual seeking it if that person looks like they've been dormant for a while. So we're going to have to kind of develop the stipulations about that, the finer details, but please get in contact with us if that is an issue in your case.
No problem. Let's see. Anything else? That was really helpful, Seth. I really appreciate that comprehensive response. I think, you know what, it is 1 minute to 2, and I've counted to 5, and I haven't seen any new questions. So I think I'm going to feel comfortable closing the webinar, because it's going to take me a minute to give closing remarks. So first, thank you so much, Seth, for doing this, for walking us through it, and for answering all these questions, and for being so patient. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for participating, and thanks for your patience from the beginning. If you have any more questions about data or just safe routes to school in general, feel free to call us on the toll-free hotline at 1-866-610-7787, or use that Contact Us, Ask a Question on the website, and we'd be more than happy to help you. You can reach Seth at data, D-A-T-A, at saferoutesinfo.org as well. And I think that's it. We're going to sign off. Thanks, everyone.